Hey, I'm Derek.
And I'm Noah, and you're listening to About It,
where we take our current favorite pop culture obsession and enjoy it one nibble at a time.
Yum, yum. I never know how you're going to end them.
Surprise, surprise. It's a change of fit.
Wait, who is that?
It's Merida / Peter Quint.
How on point.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really liking this very heavy, like, sort of Scottish brogue they're giving to Peter Quint.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't have thought he was Scottish from reading the book, but it makes sense. In Britain, there's tons of people from Ireland and Scotland. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm starting to think Jamie might be Irish.
I have no idea. I mean, she's awesome, so...
Yeah, that's true. If there's one thing we've learned from this episode, it's that Jamie's awesome. We're getting ahead of ourselves. I'm sorry. It's my fault.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
You went with me.
I did.
Yeah. That's the beauty of our relationship. So, welcome to the 6th episode of Season 2 of A Bite Of.
Which is technically episode 3 of The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Yes. Before we get into this week's episode, or this, I don't know, moments episode, how does it work when you're binging something? It's just like...
I don't know how... I hope you guys just binge this just like you binge the show or watch it with the show. I don't know. Who knows?
Tell us how you're consuming this series of A Bite Of.
Yeah, please do. But spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Because obviously, if you haven't binged all of it, if you're too scared, if you don't like to binge things, you're listening to us talk about the 3rd episode. So hopefully you've watched it already. We have not watched the entire series. We're recording as we watch.
Yeah.
So don't spoil it for us either, because I'll get mad.
Rude.
Right.
Rude.
Right.
So before we go forward, of course, we always like to take a step back. Let's just look at what we covered in the last episode of Bly Manor, which was The Pupil, episode 2. We really get Miles's boarding school backstory.
Yeah, and his terrifying ways on how he got expelled.
Right. Even though he was doing it to get home to Flora, he did some pretty awful things, even as like a 9 or 10-year-old boy.
Yeah, I still don't like it. I mean, he still killed that pigeon.
Yeah, he's still on the sociopath track. Right.
Yeah, throwing himself off of trees, choking kids out, killing
Sleeper
birds.
Holds. Yeah. And that episode ends with the Peter Quint sighting.
Yes.
In the window. And Miles faints, and that's how we end that episode.
Which is pretty much the ending of The Turn of the Screw. When he sees Peter Quint, he dies.
Exactly. And that's like, so they're like, but wait, there's more.
Right.
We're not ending it yet.
Like 6 more episodes.
Which I appreciate. Right, I think it's good that this is less of a novella and more of a full story. So that brings us to A Bite of The Haunting of Bly Manor, episode 3, The Two Faces, part 1. So
it's really interesting right off the bat, because if you see what the next episode is, it isn't part 2 of this. And I think after watching it, I get it. Because, so how we're going to explain this episode, and I think this is how this episode really was watching it, is most of it takes place in the past. So I'm assuming the events that happen in the next episode are in the past.
Past again.
So,
gotcha.
You know what I mean? So, so we're going to talk about all the stuff that happens in the past in this episode, and then we'll get into the present, because it really outweighs stuff that happens.
Throughout the episode, it's all interwoven together, but it's just easier, I think, for us, and makes more sense for us to tackle the past first. So, talking about the past, we first see PQ.
Peter Quint.
Peter Quint, he's checking out a nice button-down, blue and white stripe with a solid white collar.
Yeah, you get the 80s song Tainted Love playing.
That's right.
It's like a montage of shopping, and it's like, oh, this guy's super cool. But then you find out all of that stuff is for the uncle.
Right.
Mr. Wingrave.
And I think that it's interesting, right? So I know we just said we were going to talk about the present, but it picks up with Miles seeing Peter Quint in the window. And then Peter Quint is looking at his reflection in the store window with the button down. And I think throughout these 3 episodes, there's been a lot of sort of, there's a theme of reflection happening, right? There's a lot of things in glass or in water, people seeing themselves, seeing other things in mirrors. And so I think it's interesting that this sort of like mysterious character, when we first see him like sort of quote unquote alive in this past, he's a reflection. in a window.
Yeah. It's good editing for sure. I always love like transitions like that. It's just seamless.
Yeah.
Super good.
And they do that a couple of times this episode, which is really cool. So he brings you see him shopping, right? So he's getting alcohol, he's getting the shirt, and he brings it all to the uncle, who's basically a louse, right? He's an alcoholic.
Yeah, that's his vice. I guess that's how he's dealing with things. Who knows what he's going through? I don't know if he's still upset about the kid's parents dying, because he's related to them. I mean,
and I was wondering that, like, whose brother is he?
I want to say maybe the girl.
Charlotte, the mom?
Charlotte, yeah. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
I hope that we find out at some point, but I don't think it really matters too much. But the whole point of, you're meeting PQ, and then we also meet Miss Jessel for the first time, like alive. Because she's doing an interview to pretty much be the live-in governess at the place. And it's interesting because you see Peter Quint meeting Miss Jessel for the first time. Like, he goes out into the office and he's like, you got a stain on your shirt. And he tries to tell her like he's going to notice it. But you also can see that there's like that, not meet cute, but that little twinkle in his eye that usually in like movies and stuff, it's like, oh, he likes her. Like, he finds her attractive and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
then we get the first interaction with Miss Jessel and the uncle.
And the first thing the uncle says is, you have a stain on your shirt.
He tried to warn you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But can I also say this? This is from the man who is literally face down in his barrister paperwork, still hungover from the night before. He had to get someone to buy him a new shirt that he changed into sans shower. And then he's like, oh, you have a stain on your shirt. How dare you?
Yeah, it doesn't. He's the boss, though. It doesn't matter.
But he probably smelled.
Oh, I think she noticed because she gave him an odd look. And I don't think she's as, like, she's smarter than she lets on. And after he says the thing about the stain, she's like, well, what are they, like 8 and 9? She's like, I don't think me really caring about how my blouse looks is going to be important. Because they're kids. She's right. I was like,
I'm going to get messy working with these children.
Yeah, get it, girl.
Yeah.
Get it.
Yeah.
And then an odd thing happens, and I don't know if it's because the uncle is drunk and a loser and whatever, but Peter Quint starts interviewing her, essentially, which I think is interesting. It just seems like the uncle, anything that has to do with the manor, he does not want to deal with it. He's like constantly pushing it onto other people. So PQ essentially interviews her for it.
And I also think it sort of shows the power dynamic between PQ and the uncle. Like, even when he first goes in there to bring him stuff, he's like, here's a hair of the dog that bit ya, or whatever. And he controls the uncle. It seems like, and then he takes over the interview. The uncle is just acting as like the figurehead, while PQ is the one, playing all the strings, pulling all the strings behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem very much like, we'll get into it, but PQ is very controlling.
Yeah.
He just seems like he has to be like the puppet master, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And he uses his rakish good looks and Scottish charm. I don't know if there's a Scottish charm.
Aren't you Scottish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I charming?
I'm Irish, so I don't.
Well, the lack of answer. Thanks so much. I'm gonna go lick my wounds now. Thanks.
That's fine.
So it ends with she pieces out. And then he, like, what I thought was weird is like I don't know, when you apply for a job in England in the 80s, do I have a picture of you on file? Like, I
think you submit it with your resume.
Okay, so you need to have a headshot in.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it is weird that he already had a picture of her. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never given my picture with the resume. I know people do it.
Do you really?
Yeah, like a lot of modern resumes now, like, people will say to put your picture, especially depending on what you're interviewing for. So if it's for more of like an entertainment type thing, you would have your headshot on there.
Wow.
I don't know.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, I would not want to put my face on there. It's like, I don't think I'm ugly, but it's also like, I don't want somebody to judge my skills on what I look like.
That seems like asking for awful things to happen.
Right. So
we digress.
Yeah. So now PQ's driving her, and you get those like intimate glances through the rearview mirror, and she seems to kind of like it as well.
But you also called out the detail that I thought was really important, which is also, I think, a callback to the turn of the screw, is that he is now wearing the button down that we saw him buy for the uncle in
real
the scene
weird.
prior, which is something that happens in the turn of the screw. They say he would take his clothing
Yeah.
He would take the uncle's clothing.
Yeah, and he don't stop.
No. No.
Yeah.
So they get to the house, and the first little cherub... Well, they're actually all there waiting to greet her.
They're all there. So what I think is interesting in this episode is that it's Dani's first week, and we're also seeing Miss Jessel's first week. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool to have those parallels. And of course, meets Flora first. She's super, infatuated with her, and she tells her it's perfectly splendid. So now we get why Flora says it, because she loved it. She was like, that's a great way to say things. So I'm going to steal it. Miles is super sweet. He's super nice to her. Everybody's nice to her. Why wouldn't they be? She's beautiful. She's smart. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah. And I think throughout this whole past, set of scenes, we really do see how Miss Jessel has left an impression on Flora.
And everybody.
Right. But I think in some ways you also see how Peter Quint has left an impression on Miles.
Yes.
But they do end up taking habits and things that they literally say, and then they say that in the present times. Mm-hmm. So
unless it's not actually them saying
also
it.
True. Yeah, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah, so then we get to when she's kind of settled in now, and she's playing with dolls with Flora, and in walks Mr. PQ with a sweet little bouquet of flowers to give to Flora, quote unquote.
Right. And it's the exact same bouquet that we had seen Miles give to Dani in the episode prior, mostly white with 3 red roses.
Yeah, and he also, and I also like how Miles points out to him, is like, did you get those from Jamie's garden? She's going to be pissed, which is interesting because then he does it later.
Right.
You little shit. You knew. Mm-hmm. Right. And then in that, and you could tell with how PQ's acting that he gave them to Flora, quote unquote.
Yeah. Because
he knew that like Miss Jessel would like that. And then she ended up getting a rose as well.
Right.
And then an interesting conversation happens with Miles and PQ about the keys.
Mm-hmm. So PQ goes on this whole thing because Miles asks him that question, were those really for Flora? And he says, you see, people are really like doors. They all have locks. They all have keys. Mm-hmm. And so you have to figure out what that person's key is in order to open them.
Right.
And the thing is that, it sounds sort of poetic, but in my mind, as Peter Quint is a master manipulator, he's telling Miles, this is how you manipulate people.
Oh, for sure.
You find out what that person most needs or is most passionate about, and you use that to gain entrance into them so you can control them.
It's like, yeah, I guess like depending on what person you are or what if somebody was just to tell that, or if you read that, you're like, oh, that's interesting, unlock them to like know more about them or whatever. But it's like, but coming from him, it's like, oh, it's because you obviously are manipulating people and you're a terrible person.
Right.
Yeah.
Like my key is snacks. Mm-hmm. Not that
right.
Not that hard to figure out.
Right. And cold brew.
Yeah.
But that's why we heard Miles saying in the last episode, the pupil, why he was like, that's not your key, or what your key is, or I guess I need to keep trying to find the key.
Right. And he found the priest's key and all this stuff. And
it wasn't hard. Just kill this pigeon.
It's awful. And almost like looking back at it, it's almost like the priest's key, like the priest thing is he needs to nurture people. And the way to push him away is to be awful and not let him have that effect on you.
And to kill his pigeon.
Yeah.
I think it was a dove. I don't think it was a pigeon.
He called them Pidge.
Okay, it was probably a pigeon then.
Pigeon the pigeon?
Mm-hmm.
Pigeon the P-dove? Oh. Or is that a Pokemon?
I don't know. Right. So that night, PQ stays. Because there's a storm. And Jessel and PQ have a conversation. And this is where he's really starting to like worm his way into her and stuff like that. And he does do a smart thing where he she says that Miles threw up on her and she was cleaning it. And he was like, can you that's not okay. Like, you're smart. I know you want to do more. What's happening? What's the catch?
Right.
Essentially. And then she lets it be known that she wants to be a barrister as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the way she's doing it is she doesn't want to intern with a bunch of creepy old men. They'll put their hands up her skirt. So she's do it this way with somebody that's already a barrister, and just kind of skip all those steps. And PQ sees that. He kind of finishes the sentence, but the thing I don't like about it is that he essentially mansplains her plan to her. And I did not like that.
And see, this is also a little bit of a problem that I'm having. Like in watching this whole episode, it's upsetting to me, and maybe it's supposed to be upsetting, but the whole point of her doing this is that she's not manipulated, so she's not being sexualized in any way by a man to get ahead, and she ends up doing exactly that.
Well, I mean, I don't think it was that way for her. I think what PQ is doing is wrong, but I think for her, because, you know, it wasn't super like explosive at the beginning with her and Peter Quint. And I think from her side or her perspective, it was like, oh, he's really nice. He's handsome. You know, I'm starting to get to know him. There's more to him than I would have thought, because she finds out that his father passed away as well. So it's like, I think from her side, she's more of like, oh, this is turning into something. Like, it's not like an older man that I'm trying to get a job from, you know, but I think he sees that he can manipulate her and use that. So
exactly. But that's the shitty part, is that she's chosen this road for that to not happen to her, but then he does it to her anyway. Mm-hmm. And I hate that. You know, that's disgusting.
Yeah. And they flirt a little bit, but then that was the extent of that. And then fucking PQ, apparently he doesn't really stay around that much, but he's coming around a lot more because of Miss Jessel. Then he comes back all of a sudden and he's like, oh, I have a project to do for Wingrave, so I'm going to be here for like a week. Mm-hmm. Well, okay.
Lies and fallacies.
Right. It's weird. He doesn't say what the project is. He's like errands or something. And he's like, I'm going to be here. And of course, Miss Jessel is like, oh, cool. Yeah. Like, I like it. Yeah. Like, cause my crush is going to be here. You know what I mean? Like, of course she would be okay with that, but I don't know. I don't like it.
So they have this one night, she's laying in bed, the floorboards creak, it's him, and they have this like passionate lovemaking session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they get up the next day after having, you know, nighttime activity time, and she realizes it's late. I mean, just like every movie, and just like anytime you have like a long night of nighttime activity time, that you sleep in because you feel good, you're all like whatever. And she's like, oh God, I need to like get going because there's children I need to take care of. And this is when you start seeing him have the second face, which I'm assuming is what this episode is based on. He's becoming aggressive and very possessive because she goes and he grabs her and he's like, come back to bed. And she's like, well, patient, like you're going to stay here tonight. We'll be fine. But he does it again. And it's so weird. Something like switches with him. And I know it's because of the story, because they wanted to show his cute side and then now his like dark side. But it wasn't okay. Like, he's just very aggressive, and thankfully she's able to leave.
Yeah. And then we kind of see his aggression continue, not necessarily with her, but with the other people in the house. So Mrs. Gross and Owen are putting some stuff away in the pantry, and he comes up with like this really fancy bottle of wine, and she's like, have you been down into the cellar? And he's like, I've got his blessing. I'm allowed to do whatever I want.
Yeah, everything he says when they question him are like, well, what are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And he's like, oh, Wingrave said it was okay.
Yeah.
It's like, one, I doubt that. But two, it could be possible because she even says, I forgot you had his ear.
Right. And they're both like, whatever, this guy's so gross, I don't want to deal with him.
Right, because they make a comment about, they're like, I guess he's staying again because we have to make dinner for 7 people. Ugh, bangers and mash.
So many bangers. So much mash. And he goes off with wine glasses and a rose, and he kind of pulls Miss Jessel from the children again.
Even though she's like, I'm busy. Like, wait, the children are like...
And as they're going through the house, though, as he's bringing her to the West Wing, there's muddy footprints on the floor. And she's like, again, these muddy footprints. This is like the 3rd time this week. And it's like, okay, so this has been happening.
For a while.
These muddy footprints.
And they lead right into the West Wing, which is the Forbidden Wing.
Yeah. Cut to fur coats, Polaroid selfie, the jewelry box, wine time, naked fur coat wearing. Like, real bad. He
sets up this weird little area, so the bed's there, and on the couch is a fur coat. And Miss Jessel is like, was that Charlotte, which is the kid's mom that passed away? And he's like, oh, they're going to auction, and Wingrave said it was fine. She never wore it. And then so she's like, okay. She's kind of hesitant, but he's very pushy with it. And she puts it on, and he's like, no, fur like that, you really need to feel in your skin. Gross.
And that coat had a lining.
Yeah.
So she's not feeling nothing against her skin.
She takes off her clothes. She puts it on. They take selfies, Polaroid selfies, super cute.
Which is the one that we saw in the previous episode.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then who walks in? Miss Gross. She catches them.
Yep.
And I felt so bad for Miss Jessel. Only because, yes, she probably shouldn't have been doing that. But when you're super infatuated with somebody, you just lose track of everything you're supposed to be doing. And Miss Gross is like, the children are outside by themselves. And poor Miss Jessel has like no shirt on. She just has this fur coat that one belonged to the woman that ran the house before. And she confronts PQ about it.
Yeah. And
Miss Gross.
And he's like a little like blackmailing. He's like, if you say anything, do you know how quickly I can get you fired? And she's like, if I ever see you doing that again, I'm going to take you out by your hair and throw you in that lake. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. She really put him in her place because she doesn't care. She's like, I don't care. She was like, you do not belong in here. Do not go in here. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's some point of her, or at least the people in the house that know that he's kind of bullshitting.
Yeah.
They're like, no way. Maybe if you did explain it to Wingrave, he would believe you because you're obviously manipulating people. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, I mean, all kudos to Miss Gross. I love Miss Gross in this episode. Every episode, I seem to just love her even more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love it.
She's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Later on, there's this whole cake batter scenario. Which flavor shall win? Telemarks, Flora versus Miles.
Yeah, everybody's in the kitchen, and Sweet Owen is not making bangers and mash, but making a cake.
Right.
It's like a strawberry lemon cake.
Yeah.
And Flora says there needs to be more strawberries. Miles says there needs to be more lemon. And so Owen is having people taste it. Like, oh, which one do you think? Which one do you think? I'm shipping Owen and Miss Gross so hard.
Yeah.
But wait, is it Mrs. Gross?
This is what I wanted.
Miss Gross.
Yes, so I wanted to talk about this. So we see Mrs. Gross lighting candles. And I think in the last episode, I said that the 4 candles represented the 2 parents, Miss Jessel and Peter Quint, right? But I'm rethinking it now because I think it's the 2 parents, Miss Jessel and her husband.
Because we don't know if PQ is really dead or not.
Right.
Right.
And also, she's called Mrs. Gross.
Right.
But we're all shipping Mrs. Gross and Owen.
Yeah, cause, I mean, well, one, they're super cute and they keep flirting.
Right.
Like the whole batter scene, like she went to go open her mouth, he's like, oops, and like got it on her face and she ate it. Mm-hmm. She ate something. Yeah.
Just one little lick, though.
That's it. That's all Miss Jessel could handle for
That's
2 years.
She is perfectly satiated with just some raw batter. Also, I'm just very concerned about the raw batter going around.
Yeah, everybody had some raw batter.
This is, I mean, we've uncovered the mystery of Bly Manor. It's salmonella. Everybody's just sick.
They're all ghosts of salmonella. So Miss Jessel's turn comes, just like
everyone else.
Everybody else, Jamie, Miss Gross, the kids. She tastes it. She says what she needs. And then he's like, okay, Owen, PQ, you need to be the person to be the tiebreaker. Mm-hmm. Instead of taking it from the spoon like everybody else, this disgusted me the most so far in this episode. He takes his fingers and puts it in the batter.
His nicotine-soaked fingers that he was just smoking a cigarette in the kitchen with the children while they were baking a cake. He puts it out and then dips his smoke-soaked fingy tips right into that batter. And even Owen is just like, ugh. And then he's like, strawberry.
Yeah.
And then...
You sounded Russian. Which is fine. Whatever. Yeah, and which is weird. The whole scene was weird. And then we find out why it was so weird.
Ugh.
PQ loses his shit on Miss Jessel.
Talk about double entendre.
Yeah, he tells her it's good to know that when a man asks you to put something in your mouth, he doesn't have to ask twice. And this is where it starts getting very apparent that he's, one, not only a piece of shit, but also is super manipulative. Yeah. And Miss Jessel is buying into it. And I hate it. Yeah. I absolutely hate it. It's the most frustrating thing to watch because you as the viewer, like, okay, he's bad. We love Miss Jessel, but like, why is she believing him?
Right.
Because it's working.
And the motivation for him to be manipulating her, why? She has, unless there's something about her, it almost feels like he targeted her from the start. It feels like, does he know something about her that we don't? Why is he manipulating her? Why does he need to...
A part of me doesn't think it's that extensive. I think it's just he wants her So he wants her. Like, he just wants to make sure that, like, he has control over her. Which, just that scene is so upsetting because you see her second guess. She was like, wait, no, I think you misunderstood. Like, everybody else tasted it. And he was like, no, you were flirting with him. No, you were doing this. And it's like, oh my God.
I mean, and that's literally textbook
jealousy,
domestic violence.
Right. Yes.
It's a form of control. It's a form of manipulation. It's a form of gaslighting. It's like, people do this. This is real. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate to see Miss Jessel, who is kind and smart that this is happening to her.
Yeah.
And that's how the past ends, with him storming out on her.
We also see this, something I forgot to mention, this interesting scene with, the dolls. So she's playing with dolls with Miss Jessel, and Miles is like, dolls are dumb, whatever. And she's like, they're not. And she says something about they're more than just dolls. Or
she says, like, they're fun characters, so you get to make up.
Right.
And then Flora's like, but they're not made up.
Right. Yeah. And then she tells her that she wants to make a doll of her. What's her favorite color? And she's like, I like all colors. And she makes the little doll of Miss Jessel, which in the first episode is still in the house. Mm-hmm. She still has the Miss Jessel doll there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But she says she puts the Miss Jessel doll all in black,
which is all the colors technically.
Right. But if I believe the Miss Jessel doll, or what we're equating to be the Miss Jessel doll, is now dressed in white.
It's not the Miss Jessel doll now.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think it is, because if you notice, like, the dolls that were in the house, all the people look like people, but then there's all these creepy ones everywhere. I don't think that's the Miss Jessel, because the Miss Jessel one is still there. So now that we know what the Miss Jessel doll looks like, that's not the Miss Jessel doll that she keeps under the dresser.
They were leading me astray.
Mm-hmm. I think they led everybody astray.
It's another demon.
So now we need to find out who's the doll underneath the dresser.
Yeah. What the heck?
So back to present.
Right. So what ends up happening is that we come back to them together the night that Miles faints and they saw Peter. And so they call the cops, and Dani has gone to the jewelry box and taken the Polaroid and has said, this is the man. This is the man I saw on the parapet. This is the man that was in the window. And everybody's like, yeah, that's Peter Quint.
I like how they call him Parapet Pete. I'm
Parapet
like,
Pete. Alliteration.
But the interaction with the cop is weird. He tells them that he stole a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what happened. Mm-hmm. That he just stole money and skipped out.
So he leaves, and Dani's really unsatisfied with his policing work. So she grabs her denim jacket. She grabs the fireplace poker and a flashlight, and she's like, I'm fucking doing this. I'm doing another sweep.
Yeah. And
so she goes out. She's blazing through the grounds, and then bam, fire poker to shotgun. She comes up to Jamie, and they were both doing a sweep of the grounds together.
Super cute.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Jamie's like, I've shot a bunch of rats with this thing. I'm sure I could take down PQ. And we see that they all hate Peter Quint.
Yeah. And I think that's the main point of the present part, is that you're seeing the buildup of, like, PQ really being bad. And then in the present, obviously after all the aftermath and them being like, do not like PQ.
Yeah.
And there's also this funny thing of Owen thinking that the phone that keeps ringing is Peter Quint.
Yeah.
Because we find out that he might not know that Miss Jessel died.
Exactly.
Because he was gone.
Right.
When she died. So that's interesting. So is PQ really dead?
I don't know. And it's kind of confusing, right? As two people who read the Turn of the Screw,
they were dead.
They were both dead, and we just knew that right off the bat. And in this one, nobody actually really seems to know what happened to Peter Quint, which also is like, why would he return after all this time when we all know that he drained one of Mr. Wingrave's bank accounts?
Well, it's also, I think it's interesting the way they put it in the show, because it makes it seem like he's a ghost. Like, he shows up, he disappears, he's there, he's not there. So it's either the story is leading us in the wrong direction, or there's something more to it. Mm-hmm. So I'm super excited to find out.
Yeah.
What all that is about.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool to see when all the kind of loose ends come together. Mm-hmm. So at the end of this scouting, they come into the kitchen, and Owen's like, you know what, I'm going to stay here with you all, because this got really crazy. Because they're all sitting around drinking hot cocoa, and guess who's not drinking hot cocoa?
Yeah, and Flora points it out. So there's something weird about Miss Mrs. Gross not eating because Flora's like, you haven't touched your hot chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Can I have it? She's like, no.
She's like, no, you're going to be up all night, but I'm not going to have it either.
Yeah. It's just going to sit here and go bad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to waste this.
Right. And then they have like a little nice time around the fire.
Yeah.
They fall asleep. And then you see Mrs. Gross like resting on Owen's arm. And, like,
mm-hmm. And he's like so pleased about it.
I'm like, yes, I know you're in love with her, but
Yeah.
why aren't you loving him back?
Yeah. So there's like these three pairs, right? So there's Miles and Flora sleeping by the fire.
Mm-hmm.
There's Mrs. Gross falling asleep on Owen. And then there's Dani and Jamie having a conversation about love versus possession and what
Love
it means,
and ownership.
right? What it means to love someone and what it means to feel like you have ownership over someone. And you can tell that they both had a history where maybe something they thought was love was actually possession. And so Dani makes this point that they're actually quite opposite, and you wouldn't think that they can't exist at the same time.
Yeah, she was like, they're opposite. Love and ownership aren't the same.
Right.
But I think Jamie was like, well, look at PQ and Miss Jessel.
Right.
Which, of course, yeah, she's not giving the whole story right off the bat. But it's interesting because I feel like the book in this aspect where it's, you have the narrator, Carla Cugino, telling the story, and then you have Dani experience it for the first time, but then Jamie she already knows what's happened. So
right.
it's an interesting like loop of narration going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the narrator does also narrate parts about Miss Jessel in the past and then coming back to it. So she's telling them some tale by that fire and by that rehearsal dinner.
I mean, she's going on like more than 3 hours now. Like there's 9 episodes. That's 9 hours.
And happy wedding to you.
Yeah, they're supposed to get married tomorrow. Let them go to sleep. God.
So they all go to bed, and as Dani's laying in bed, she gets a glimpse of the glasses that were left there when she had the freak out with Flora. And she turns around, and as she turns around, there's a bloody hand reaching for her with like a watch and a dress shirt on. And she starts to freak out, and she closes her eyes, and then it's gone.
I got flashbacks of Nell having sleep paralysis. And I was like, I'm so sorry, girl, Victoria, that you have to keep acting this way. But you do it so well.
It's a bump in the night sort of thing.
Right.
She has to deal with it constantly.
Yeah. Next morning, wakes up. Miles is all ready to go and standing, like watching the door, waiting for it to open. Super weird. I don't like it. And he's like, once we find Flora, then we can go do this. And she's like, what do you mean find Flora? She shouldn't be up. Then we see Flora staring at the lake, all creepy kid-like. And Dani runs out there to get her, and she's just completely like belligerent. She's just like, no, no, no. And then we see Miss Jessel on the other side of the lake, which Dani didn't see, but I'm assuming Flora did.
Yeah.
Doctor comes, and he's like, well, they're fine physically, but she should probably just stay in bed because they're fucked up in the head.
Yeah. Everybody has this sort of like final clause whenever they're talking about the children. They're always like, well, with what they've been through.
Right. Like, okay, we get it. Do you have to mention their dead parents all the time?
And the drowned nanny.
Right. Let them get over it.
We get it. We know what happened.
Right. And Dani brings up a good point. She was like, well, why was she by the lake? She hates the lake.
Here comes creepy Miles again, popping up.
Eavesdropping.
Yeah, popping up in Flora's room again. And he's like, well, Flora's a liar.
One, I thought it was a pond, Flora. So lying. Somebody's lying about a pond lake. So.
Yeah, know your bodies of water.
Right.
And also, Miles, I think you're a liar. You suck.
Right. So then we fast forward a bit. And it's nighttime.
Yep.
So then I guess they're having story time. Flora's
Yeah.
story time with the tale of the apple cat named Tails.
Yeah. But I do love this moment though, when they come in to announce that it's story time, and like in unison, Owen says, oh good, story time. And Jamie goes, oh God, story time.
Yeah, at the same time. I love Jamie. She is like, she is me. I feel like if I was in that situation, I'm like, oh my God, I just want to sit here and drink this drink.
So good.
So then we have a cute little story from Flora, and then we get to Miles. Way to fuck up story time, man.
Though that dude starts off nice, right? He starts telling a story about this group of puppets.
He's Poppet the puppet.
Poppet the puppet. And he's like totally jovial. He's got a little handlebar mustache happening. He's adorable. He's walking down the stairs. And then you see it.
It shifts.
The right hand goes into the pocket.
Yeah.
And as he walks with that hand in the pocket, he becomes menacing. And he's walking down the stairs and he's saying, I came back and I had control of all these puppets and they forgot that I had control of them and they laughed at me. And he's like going on and on about.
You remembered way more than I did of that line. The thing I got from it was like, oh, somebody's controlling.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for me, again, we see this thing, right, of love. So to me, it's Miss Jessel's love for Flora, but Peter's possession of Miles.
Yeah, it seems very much, it's becoming more apparent that they're emulating them in some way. I don't know if they're being possessed by them, influenced by them, but Miles is doing a lot of things that PQ did.
Yeah. I think he's being possessed by PQ.
It would go into what we thought from the original story.
Right. And then when he rounds the corner, he gives the speech, the phone rings, so Jamie gets up to get the phone, and he has this moment where he almost like he looks like he's going to throw up, Miles. Like something has left him. Like he feels like, oh, like what happened? Like, am I here again? Where am I?
I didn't see that. I saw red with him. I can't stand that child.
No.
He's such an asshole. And like, of course, if he's being possessed by PQ, I'm sorry. But until I find that out, I do not like you, Miles.
I hate you no matter what.
Right. And so Jamie answers the phone and she was like, stop it, Pete. She's dead. But that was like the wrong time to do it because Owen stayed an extra night to stay with them and his mother died.
Yeah.
Which is super upsetting.
Yeah.
And then, but we do get this sweet little moment. So he's leaving, he's going out and he hugs, the other people out in the house. And then Mrs. Gross walks him to the car. I keep saying Miss Gross, but it's Mrs. Gross. Walks him to the car and she whispers something, which we don't hear. A tear falls from his eye and then he leaves. And then we get this other sweet moment with Dani and Jamie, because Jamie's also leaving. And I'm like, are we going to have a San Junipero moment in this show? Because I feel like we are, because Dani touches her hand and she was like, oh, who would have known? And it's like, ooh, yay. But that's to me, since there's these two things that we're seeing in this episode, or at least maybe just the theme of the show, between love and possession,
right.
Love and ownership, that's cute.
Right.
PQ and Miss Jessel ain't cute.
No. So we're seeing that, right? The two sides. This is love. Love is small and caring and growing, and you get to know someone. Because let's not forget, Peter and Miss Jessel's relationship literally happens within like 3 days.
Yeah, it's a little too quick.
Yeah, there might be a jump there where he leaves and comes back, but they're still not in contact during that time.
But it couldn't have been long because you could see the other staff members being like, oh my God, he's here again?
Yeah, and so that's that possession, right? That digging into someone and trying to control them. Whereas Jamie and Dani have this really sweet moment that sort of turns, because in our final moments of this episode, Jamie leaves for the night and our girl Dani turns around and all the sound drains from the scene.
We got headlight glasses guy.
Staring
right at her.
And we see more of his form this time, right? So we see
definitely a man.
We see he's a man. He has a moppy head of hair. He has these big glasses with these lights in them.
It looks like how in headlights, like the reflective material that you would see, because that's how the lights shine out. That's how most of the light comes out. It looks like you're looking into that with his glasses. So it's very odd.
So there's something happened, right? Because even when we saw that hand in that scene, it was cut up and bloody. And what happened?
Car accident?
Was it a car accident? Did she hit someone? Did she not help them? For a moment, I was like, she killed PQ. I was like, cool. She's the one that's killed him. That's why she's been in London for so long, because she murdered this guy and now he's haunting her again. But then the hair didn't match. Because I was trying to look at the hand and to see if the shirt was the striped shirt.
No, it was just blue.
It was just blue, but there was a big watch on the hand. And he wears a big watch. So
I mean, it could be one of those things where she hit the person, but she didn't get a good look at him. So what she's seeing is what she thought she saw, even if it is PQ.
Yeah.
That would be a twist.
And
then right when it ends, Mr. Headlight Glasses guy gets yanked into the house, which I do not get. It's terrifying. But what?
Super spooky.
Right. And wait, there's one more thing. I keep forgetting about the fucking cracks. Right when Owen leaves, Mrs. Gross is like, oh, I'm going to go light a candle. She's in there. She sees another crack.
Yeah.
At the top. And it's gone.
And then it's gone again.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
What's with the cracks?
But I'm not surprised. I'm very surprised you're not bringing up the thing that you saw the entire episode.
The ghosts?
Yeah, the military ghosts.
Yeah, I just feel it's hard to like, when we're talking about these things, it's hard to be like, oh, by the way, there's a ghost here, because it's like you see them in the moment and you kind of forget about them.
But I just need to tell the people, the listeners, Noah is on Ghost Watch 2020 when we are watching this.
We have to constantly keep rewinding it.
Yes, because I'm not noticing it. So I'm always very invested in like the two main figures on the screen. And I'll be watching something and then Noah will literally make this noise. And I'm like, what? So there's been this military figure that's been haunting Miss Jessel the entire time.
Yeah.
So he or she, it is in the room with her when they're talking about the dolls. It's in the kitchen with them when she's talking to BQ. And I'm trying to think if we see it again.
There was a couple more, but it was hard to tell like what they looked like.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a few times. This is the first time I've seen like a military figure, because in the first episode, it was that like crow face looking one. And then the other one, it was the doll people or whatever. So it seems like every episode there's like different types of ghosts.
Yeah. I want to like, can we just I want to like collect the ghosts for a moment here. So we've always had the headlight glasses guy that appears in mirrors. And now this time not in a mirror. He's just been out in the open at the end of this episode. This is the first time we see him not in a mirror.
Yeah, I don't like it.
No, very scary. Then we've had the crow ghost. The crow ghost was in the first 2 episodes and always seems to be lurking around Dani at night in the house.
Or just, for sure. It's, it's like the one that looks like it's made out of like brown paper bags.
Yeah, but you brought up that really good point that like back in the day, doctors would wear those masks.
Yeah, the medical masks. Yeah. I would be terrified if a doctor looked like that. He's like, here, I'm trying to save you. It's like, please, not with that mask. I
Also,
could poke my face out.
Thank you. How you cannot get close enough to examine me correctly with that beak? Not right. Not cool. So those are both of Dani's ghosts. This episode, we also saw Miss Jessel's ghost by the lake, which seems to be going after Flora.
She was wearing a black dress.
Right.
Just like the doll.
Just like the doll. And Flora also has doll ghosts.
Right.
Like we saw in the attic in the last one.
Yeah, when she was hiding and she was humming. Then that ghost was kind of trying to sing and hum with her. Wasn't doing it.
And that's the song in the jewelry box. And
Willow Wiley.
Which has come up a lot.
Yeah, so the funny thing, I saw that coming up a bunch, and so I researched it. And it's from The Innocents, the movie adaptation of The Turn of the Screw. It's from that. And in the very first scene, when Carla Gugino is narrating, she says lines from that song. And every time that the music box plays, it's the same thing. PQ was singing the song a couple times. He's whistling it. So it's very much that song is a theme in the show.
Yeah.
I don't know why yet, but...
So yeah, there's the ghost of the song of the Willy Wonka. What is it?
Willow Wiley.
Willow Wiley. Maybe there's other stuff we've missed, but those are sort of the main ones that we've seen in the first 3 episodes of this.
I know that the haunting of Bly Manor, the social media accounts have been posting like ghosts.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit that I've even missed. Okay. It seems like there's a lot, just like the first season. So, but there was something that I did want to point out because I'm noticing this theme or the difference between The Haunting of Hill House and this one. It's like where The Haunting of Hill House was about love you're born into, like the love of the family. It seems that The Haunting of Bly Manor is about the love you find, romantic love. And for better or for worse, it seems like Bly breeds it.
Interesting.
It seems like everybody they get paired up every time they're there. So it's like Owen and Mrs. Gross, even though, Owen should have been with his mom, he couldn't help it but be with Mrs. Gross. And then Mrs. Gross has a husband, I'm assuming, somewhere. But, she's going to that. And then Jamie and Dani, Miss Jessel and PQ. Yeah. So it's interesting. And
it's interesting. It was those 3 pairs by the fire that night. And wow, really good point. That's great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, literature and stuff.
Yeah, so that is episode 3.
Yeah.
And part 1, I don't know when part 2 happens in the series, but...
May never.
And guess we'll find out.
We'll find out what happened to Miss Jessel at some point.
I don't want to.
But before we go, let us get into our newest segment, Creepy kids.
Creepy kids. Oh yeah, it's my turn this time again. So we're passing it off every time. So I'm gonna do Reagan from The Exorcist.
Ooh, good one.
Not only because is that child terrifying, even before she gets all green and pukey. This girl, so like before she gets all like possessed and stuff. Do you remember in that movie where there's that like dinner party and everybody's down there like singing tunes and stuff, and then she like descends down the stairs and she's like, "You're all gonna die up there." What is wrong with you?
Whoopsies.
It's like, everybody leave, call your Ubers, get out of here.
Gotta go. You know what? Oh, the sitter called. I gotta go.
God,
yeah.
I always hated her. I hate that movie. It is terrifying, but I hate that child.
Yeah.
And everything about it is just awful.
Sometimes I think about like the actors, the child actors who have to play these characters. Like Linda Blair had to play this insane possessed child that said and like whatever, like she had like mouth horrible things and like
about people's mothers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the stuff with the crucifix and all that stuff. It's like, I mean, I guess if you want your child to be famous, you'll let them take whatever roles, right?
I mean, like, as long as the child doesn't take it seriously and think that they're actually possessed by a demon or Satan or Legion, I'm fine with it. Like, my kid could go say that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's fine, but just leave it at work. Don't come home with that.
Resume, still the Antichrist.
Puking everywhere again. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to A Bite Of, artwork and editing by our own Noah. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at A Bite Of Pod and on Facebook at A Bite Of. If you have questions, recommendations, or just want to say hi, you can email us at abiteofpod@gmail.com. You can find us on all podcast platforms. Please be sure to rate and review to spread the word. Hope you join us next time on A Bite Of. Bye.